Hey, this is Kurt Graham. You are listening to the Making of an Exception podcast. And today we got Kath Brose. What's up, Kath?
Hello.
Thanks for being here. So
glad to be here.
Glad to be here?
Yeah.
We're glad to have you. I'm stoked to have you on the podcast. Kath is an author, a writer, poet. You are a wife. You're a cat mom to
Yes. Floyd.
I know your cat, Floyd.
Yes.
It's amazing.
I think everyone knows him.
And I know a little bit of your story and journey and just who you are. I think you are insanely gifted as a writer, and I'd love to talk about today. I mean, this is the making of an exception. So you are an exception to the rule, and how did you get to where you are today? And so, I'd love for you to just start talking about who you are and what you're doing right now as a writer.
So like you said, I'm a wife, just got married
How long
9
ago?
months ago. 9, I think.
I was at that wedding.
Yeah, you sure were? You were in it.
I was in that wedding.
You were in that wedding. So we've been married 9 months, haven't killed each other yet. So
Praise God.
Basically now we're writing a book on marriage because we know everything after 9 months. So
there's people's advice that says if you can get through the first year, then you're going to make it. But which is true. There's challenge in the first year, but I think the first years can be amazing. Yeah. So has it been awesome?
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, definitely hard, but hard in like a good way.
Yeah,
been
totally.
Really
You're
good.
learning new rhythms. You're learning to how to share a bed and a bedroom and a house and all that. So
totally. And
amazing.
I'm learning that I'm a lot messier than I ever thought I was. So
Caleb, your husband, let you know?
Yeah, he's very neat. So we're navigating that, but we'll figure it out. Yeah.
Learn how to communicate.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so married, just trying to navigate the freelance life, like writing and content creation and just figuring all of that out and what that looks like on an everyday basis.
Yeah, so you don't work for a company, you don't work for agency or anything like that as a copywriter. You are on your own, building your own business.
Yep.
Kath Brose Enterprises.
Yep. That's what it's going to be called. So,
well, you're a blogger. You actually have a blog.
Yep. Yeah. Damsel Semi-Distressed, which
my goodness.
I came up with that name in like 9th grade of high school, I think, but it's stuck.
14 years old. Yeah. You were semi-distressed.
Yeah. Pretty semi-distressed.
I think it's a great title. It's awesome.
Thanks.
It's amazing.
Yeah. But I work part-time at Anthropology.
Yep.
So that's pretty thrilling.
Live in retail.
Yeah. Love it. And then do writing and freelancing the rest of the time.
It's awesome.
It's pretty much life right now.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Mounds View. It's kind of the forgotten suburb. No one
Mounds
ever
View,
knows
Minnesota.
what it is. Yeah, it's like the hood of the suburbs.
Yep.
No one ever knows what I'm talking about. But yeah, so pretty close to where I live now in St. Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And so you grew up in Mounds View, your family. I know you have a brother, parents, just you guys.
Yep. Yeah. So mom and dad, and then my half brother. He is 9 years older than me.
What's his name?
His name's Ryan.
Shout out Ryan.
Ryan Griffey.
You call him Griffey
on Instagram. So
if you're looking,
give him a follow.
Give him a follow. I'll follow him. I'll follow him right now.
Oh, great. Yeah, pull out your phone.
That's awesome.
But he's 9 years older than me. So growing up, it kind of felt like I had like a second dad for a while because it was like he was so much older than me.
Yeah.
But now we're really close as we've gotten older. So that's been fun. Because like once you hit your 20s, I feel like there's not really a huge age difference. Like doesn't matter.
Totally.
Yeah. But so my brother, my mom and dad, that was it growing up.
Part of this podcast and the people that are on, one of the reasons why you're on is not just because you're talented and gifted in these areas of writing and communicating just some internal stuff through like the written word, but it's also because of like hearing people's faith journeys too and kind of where they're at. And Kaylee and I, my wife, we view you as an awesome, powerful woman of God who's not just talented, but also I think you're anointed to do exactly what you're doing in writing to make a difference in people's lives, specifically like in the faith world as well, that people that are navigating their faith and working it out on their own, that they can read what you're writing and be inspired like, man, if Kath is living for Jesus, I can too. Yeah. Like with the thing, like if I know some of Kath's story and I relate with that and she's doing it, like I feel like I can do it. And so I'd love to hear a little bit of like maybe your upbringing and family life and kind of were you raised in the church, that type of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I was raised Catholic, so kindergarten through senior year of high school wore a uniform every day.
You went to a Catholic school?
Yeah. I went to 2 different schools, but they were both Catholic schools. So yeah, Catholic school growing up, very strict uniform. In high school, we got detention if we didn't have our shirt tucked in, if we weren't wearing a belt. It was ridiculous.
It's my worst nightmare.
I know.
Tucking in my shirt. Even today, I
know.
got thick thighs, so it's kind of an issue for me. I'll never tuck in my shirt.
That's okay. You don't go to Catholic school, so I guess you don't have to.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Catholic school growing up, and I didn't really know. I knew that God was real, and I knew that He loved me, but I didn't have like a personal relationship with Him.
Yeah.
Pretty much all I thought of religion was like church pews and a rosary. I knew it was like beautiful symbols, but I didn't really know what any of it meant.
Did you guys go to church on Sundays? Like you were part of a church?
My parents were super involved at church, still are. My dad's like the head of like every little Catholic committee at our church, all the little old men. The Catholic church specifically that we went to was like all old people. So that was great. I think that I blame that on my obsession with old people now.
That's why you have an old soul.
Yeah, just all the Catholic
Well, I do
masses.
know this about you is you will cry.
Oh, yeah.
Just seeing an old person.
It's embarrassing.
It actually sounds kind of sad, actually, but you just to see them because you love them.
Yeah, I just love them so much. My first job actually was at a nursing home. So
yeah. It's interesting. So when you think about church, like in your upbringing, you think church is a bunch of old people, which is nice.
Yeah.
It didn't necessarily, it wasn't negative, but that's just what you think.
Not like super relatable.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So grew up Catholic. And then when I was graduating high school, most of the kids from my high school were going off to like Catholic college.
Yep.
So we were kind of like splitting 2 ways. There was like 2 Catholic colleges to choose from, and most people were going to those. And especially at that point in my life, I was so like used to just being safe and like doing what was comfortable. And I wasn't super like outgoing. So I like was going to choose one of those colleges just because that seemed like the normal next step.
Yeah. Did you know what you wanted to study?
A little bit. I knew I wanted to go into like English or lit or something like that.
It's lit.
Lit. Yeah.
It's lit.
It's a new major for the kids.
It's literature,
kids
people.
These days.
Yeah.
But yeah. And so I was like enrolled at one of the colleges, had signed up for classes and everything, got accepted. And then like last minute, like it's like a month before we graduate high school or whatever. And I heard about this college called Bethel, and I had never heard of it before. And it's a Christian university, like pretty small in the cities. And I was like, I think I'm going to go there. And I didn't know anyone else going there. And that was the first time I think that I like tangibly felt like God speaking in my life.
Yeah.
And I had like heard people say that before, like, oh, that's like a God thing.
But you didn't know how to relate.
No, I didn't know how to relate. Yeah. So that was like the first time in my life I think that I was like, oh, this is God and this is where He wants me to go. Yeah.
Do you feel like it played out that way? Like it was like for sure a God thing?
Totally. Yeah. It changed like the trajectory of my life, I think.
What did you study at Bethel?
So I did English Lit, the first literature, the first 2 years. And then I switched over to journalism. So I ended up graduating with a degree in journalism and a minor in creative writing. Yeah,
awesome. Did you, like when you were studying, did you have, basically were you thinking you'd be doing what you're doing now? Or did you have, like, did you want to be a journalist? Like, did you want to write a newspaper? Did you want to?
I kind of went through like some weird phases in college.
Let's talk about all of them.
Yeah. So freshman year, I was like, great, I'm going to be an author. Like for sure. Yeah. That's what I'm going to do. But then I sort of felt like, oh, that's not super realistic. Like, how am I going to make a good living, or like, what's my life going to look like if I'm just an author? Sure. So then I switched to journalism, and I was like, I'm going to be on the news. Like, I'm going to be a news broadcaster.
Like an anchor.
Yeah. 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 Like one of those people that
amazing.
Looks all fancy and sits behind the desk.
Yeah.
But then I realized I'm way too shy for that, you know? So then I was like, okay, can't do that. But then I'd already done journalism for 2 years. So I was like, well, I'm kind of stuck with it now. But what ended up happening is journalism just sort of expanded the horizon for writing. Like it challenged me to write in not so much of a creative way, which is just what what I naturally gravitate towards. So it ended up widening my horizon, and I'm grateful that I did it. But yeah, I had no idea that I'd be like doing what I'm doing now. So.
Yeah. And I know you made some of your best friends at Bethel too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is awesome. And some of them have gone to our church, River Valley, for a long time. So I think that it's just cool that, God led you to a different school. You had no idea. You made some of your best friends.
Right.
You went through all your weird phases. Yeah. I don't think they're weird. I think it's normal. Thanks. It's part of growing up. Part of what we haven't talked about is within writing is you do poetry. Mm-hmm. And it's like, do you call that, I guess you just call it creative writing.
Yeah.
But just, so you're a poet.
Yeah.
That's your title.
I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. And like within poetry, as it continues to develop, I was talking with a songwriter on another episode of this podcast, and you, like with writing songs, you have to kind of pick like an avenue that you want to go down. You can write all types of songs,
right?
But you got to pick like, hey, what's my niche? What am I going to do? And do you feel like poetry that's your niche within writing? Is that what you like? If it was your dream that you would be a poet the rest of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that my writing has sort of like evolved over the years. I started writing when I was so young. I don't even like know. I don't have a moment where I remember deciding like I'm going to be a writer. Yeah. I just remember that I've always written. Yeah. And I know when I was like really young, I would write like poems that were like so abstract that they didn't make sense just because I didn't actually know what poetry was. So I just kind of wrote words and put them together. Yeah. And then like over the years, it's sort of become more of like a story and less of like, this is super cryptic. Like this is a really artsy, beautiful thing. So I think that poetry is sort of like one way to put it, but it's more just like, creative writing, I guess. Did
it start out like your passion for writing? Did it start out just for you, or has it always been, I want to write? Because some people do art so that they can display it for others. Some people do art because it's therapy for themselves, you know? Right.
I think that just like looking back on my life now, like how far I've come and like where I'm at right now, I think that writing definitely has been something that like has been a way, like an outlet for just like pain and hurt and like different things I've gone through in my life. So I think it's always sort of been one of those things that I just rely on in a way. Like it's something that is an outlet for me. Yeah.
It's how you process that pain, right? How you work it through. Right.
And sometimes I don't even really like understand what I'm feeling until I've written it down, and then I can kind of read it back and I'm like, yeah.
That's weird because it's a way for you to externally process,
right?
But by yourself. Yeah. Which is crazy. It'd be like if somebody talked to themselves. Right. Which is crazy. And I do that. So it's awesome. I'm an external processor, but with my words. So I like have to get it out. Right. That's probably why we're doing a podcast, is because I just like talking. Yep. Hopefully you talk a lot more in this podcast than me, but
I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah. But the goal was, it started with just, this is how I'm processing my pain. It's not, hey, I want to put this out for the world. Right. But since you have, like, you put it out on your blog. Yeah. You're writing a book, which we'll talk about later. But it started to encourage thousands of people around the world. I remember being at a conference with your husband, Caleb, who's one of my best friends.
He's a good egg.
Yeah, he's a good egg. Great egg. Love Caleb. And I remember he had a conference, and a random girl, like we were somewhere in the country, random girl comes up to him and was like, hey, and it was kind of like startling at first. Like, and she goes, are you Kath Brose's husband? Are you Caleb Brose? And he's like, yeah. And he told me later this happens to him a lot. Oh my gosh. Locally for sure, like in Minneapolis, but around the country, like where people will come up and say, hey, are you Kath Brose's husband? Yeah. Which is,
he's such a good sport about it.
Well, for sure. I'd be stoked if that was like my wife, like, and my wife's awesome too. But yeah, for sure. He was stoked about it. But she like expressed to him at a deep level in 2 minutes how much of a difference your words, and she said that specifically, like her words have changed my life. And if I remember right, she lived in Peru.
Oh my gosh.
She's like from Peru.
I don't know if I heard about this.
She's from America, but she's living now in Peru. Okay. And she's like, I've followed your wife for years. And so like you're legit helping thousands of people around the world with your words, which is crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah, God can use your pain for a purpose to impact people's lives. With poetry, and I am talking a lot, so I'm sorry, I'll let you talk. But with poetry, do you want to talk about like, what do you write about, and what is some of that pain that you process like through poetry that is now impacting people's lives and making a difference?
Yeah. I also just wanted to say a quick story that Caleb, my husband, he was in Canada like a couple months ago with our pastor, and he was on a whale watching tour, and I didn't even know he was going on a whale watching tour. It's just the life he leads. Yeah, exactly. Just so exciting. And I was on Instagram one night and I get this message from a girl that I don't know, and it's a picture just of like a boat out in the water, and it's like a far away picture of like a lot of people, and there's just one little person, like it's like a dot in the corner just circled. And I'm like,
it's weird.
So thanks for this. And then she sends a message and she's like, I'm on a whale watching tour with your husband in Canada right now. And I was like, cool, tell him I say hi. But I don't think she ever said hi, but it was still so crazy. I was like,
yeah, for sure. All the stuff that you post out on like Instagram and your blog, it's reaching all around the world. Yeah. Which is insane, the day and age we live in.
It is.
But talk about what you write about.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like you said, I didn't always intend to like share my words with everyone.
Yeah.
I used to be a big Tumblr girl, if you know what Tumblr is.
Totally.
Like a real angsty blog.
Yeah. Do you know what Zynga is?
No. Don't know what it is.
I win.
You what?
I win. I'm just saying Zynga is like before MySpace.
Oh. I didn't even have
somebody
MySpace.
Out there listening to be like, I still have my Zynga account.
Oh my gosh.
Anyways.
Yeah, but Tumblr was big into that and wrote real angsty stuff on there and posted like all
what
of
do you
my
mean angsty, like
just like all my angsty like teen
dramatic
thoughts.
Yeah.
Just like all my pent up feelings about life, you know.
Growing up is hard.
Yeah, it is. Like that's when I went through like my Blink 182 Simple Plan phase, you know, all the angst. But
Simple Plan. Okay.
I loved Simple Plan.
Great.
Still dabble with them sometimes.
Great.
But I posted all my writing on there just because all my followers were just strangers. Like I didn't, I mean, much like social media now, I guess, but it just, at the time it felt like, oh, these people.
There was less interaction with the people.
Yeah.
So they could access it, but there wasn't much.
Right. I didn't really know if they were reading it or anything. So it felt like my own personal diary kind of just online. But then I remember like a time where I started to get messages every once in a while on Tumblr of people like saying that like, hey, I feel the exact same way of like what you just posted and all that. And so then I eventually like started posting things on, I got an Instagram, started posting on there, and and so it's like, it's just crazy seeing the response of people. Like you just don't know what other people are feeling. And like, sometimes you feel so alone in what you're feeling. And you like forget that other people are there too. But
yeah. So your niche within poetry is essentially the story that you have and your life thus far. And from what I can tell from the outside looking in is you write about the fact that you write about words, which is funny. But you write, that sounds weird just saying it, but you write about words, and that words, and this is sometimes because I haven't read your whole, like
you haven't read everything,
your life's work. But you write that words create within you a safe place. Yeah. And it is like you write about the fact that it's therapeutic and all that. And so is that your niche as a writer, talking about things like anxiety, talking about mental health, talking about how hard it is to navigate this life at times, and writing's been that outlet for you? Yeah.
I'd say like, my like niche is I just want to like create a safe place that people can come and be like, oh, me too. Like I feel that too. So I think my writing is just like honest. I don't know that there's really like a way to categorize it. I think it's just like what I'm feeling. And I try to be as vulnerable as possible without just like being depressing, because it's possible to be vulnerable and have there be hope in it too. So, I think that like what I want, the space I want to create with my writing is a place for people to come and to just feel understood and feel like they might be in pain too, but that there's hope, and that,
I think that is what you provide. Again, I'm just saying, I know you personally, but I also know you via social media.
Right.
And what people see is somebody that looks put together, like through photos. Yeah. But then when you read the words and what you're experiencing through life and how you're processing, there is brokenness within there. And it's just insane that God can use our pain to help somebody else. Yeah. That's maybe dealing with the same thing.
Totally. And I think social media is just so tricky. Like I have such a hard time with it a lot of the time. I think it's tricky because it can look just like a really put together, like filtered life, and that's fine. And I think that social media is really good to use for that too, because I think it's fun to see like the beautiful and the like highs of people's lives. But I think that, my main goal is to like showcase that, but also to say like, hey, it's okay to hurt and to like feel these things too. So I think that's like something I'm really passionate about just with social media.
Yeah. Something we were talking about before we started rolling was the fact that with your art, you're able to be, you're able to, like it's artsy. It can be cryptic. So you're not necessarily labeling exactly like what you're going through, which I think helps people relate with. Yeah. Because they could be on a completely different level, but somehow they identify with your art, you know, and it helps them. Would you want to talk about like anything that like maybe it's just for me, I remember as a teenager, like growing up was just hard, like fitting in, making friends, building relationships. We moved in going into my junior year from Wisconsin to North Dakota. And I felt like that was like the hardest thing that I've ever gone through. Yeah. Maybe talk about something in your life that, I mean, the platform for talking about anxiety or mental health or anything like that. And I understand the art of it is being cryptic, but is there anything like in growing up or high school or relationships or anything like that you feel like, man, this is pain that I've walked through that has now given me a platform to help people? Yeah.
I think that, like I was talking to my husband about this a little bit just the past few days, trying to kind of figure out like what I want to say or how I want to word it. Just like growing up, I've always just kind of been like a little bit odd, not like odd in a bad way, but I've always just kind of like wanted to just be a little different and just be myself. And I think that's always in a way made me feel a little bit like outside the crowd, almost like self-inflicted, like feeling like a little bit of an outsider. And growing up, like I had like a really great childhood, like super happy, just like I said, always just a little bit strange.
Little Kath running around. Little strange Kath.
Little strange Kath.
Listen, you're describing yourself. It's not me. I think Kath is awesome.
Thanks.
Yes.
But I was talking, Caleb actually said the other day, he was like, Kath, I figured out exactly who you were as a child. And I said, okay, please enlighten me. And he's like, you were the kid who showed up at another person's family dinner and said like, does anyone want to see my rock collection? And I was like, yes. You're not wrong. You're not completely wrong. But yeah, so that's kind of like me as a kid. But then, as soon as I went into high school, I feel like that was when I first started to recognize like the first signs of anxiety and depression. Yeah. And it was never really like named for me. It was never like, you have depression or like you have anxiety. It was just something I kind of could like feel. And I don't think I recognized it then, but looking back, I'm like, oh, that's definitely when it started. Yeah. But the dynamics within my family were sort of like, we don't talk about like painful things. We don't talk about bad things. Like, both my parents have been through a lot, and they, I think, kind of got to a point where they're like, no, like kind of like what we talked about with social media. Like if they had social media, they don't know how to work social media. But if they did, I think they would be the type of people who would like only post about like the highs and
which is what 99% of people do anyways. Totally. They just show the good parts. Because real life, which what everybody experiences, is painful at times and is broken at times. And every family has pain in it. Yeah. And every family has hurt within it too. That is whether it's self-inflicted within the family or it's happened to them because of whatever it may be. Right. Every family, for sure. So you guys are unique, but you're also not unique in the sense that there's pain in every family. Yeah,
totally. But I think that the dynamics within my family were just always a little bit like unique in that we're really close. Mostly growing up, it was me, my mom, and dad, because my brother was so much older. By the time I was growing up, he was kind of out of the house, off at college, like living his own young adult life. Yeah. So most of my life, it was just me, my mom, and dad. And we were really close, but it was, like I said, like one of those things where we just kind of shoved everything under the rug. If something was bad, we just didn't talk about it. And I think I kind of was the beacon of light in like my home. Like I knew there was like painful things and hard things, but we just didn't talk about them. So I kind of took on the responsibility of being like
bubbly and
exactly. And like nothing's ever wrong. So I think when I was going through like anxiety and depression, I never told my parents.
Get to process that.
So it was all sort of just like shoved down and not talked about. And then like most of my life, like high school and college, like I just didn't really still acknowledge it. It was sort of like something I knew was there. Yeah. But it was like, that was where writing really came in handy. I wrote about it, and I think that's like where I met God the most was just through words, and like, okay, I can't talk about my anxiety or my depression with anyone else. So I'm going to write about it. And there were times where I would feel something and I wouldn't be able to recognize it until I wrote it down. And that's when I like realized that's where God was meeting me. I was like, I wouldn't be able to write that on my own if it weren't for God speaking into my life.
It's almost like, I mean, we believe in God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit is helping you. It's almost like he's your counselor.
Right.
In the sense of, which is actually one of his titles, by the way, like that he's Holy Spirit, the counselor. But he helped you navigate some of that stuff when you didn't feel maybe the freedom to do that. Not even because of your parents, but just because of the pressures that we as kids at times put on ourselves. I can't bring this up. I can't process it with my family. And so that's what I was going to ask you is, through this process in high school and college and feeling some of these things, anxiety and depression, where are you at with God in that moment? Like, how are you, like, did you really feel like it was a conversation with God on paper, or do you feel like he just supernaturally it was just after the fact, like, oh man, that was God helping me?
Yeah. I mean, I think that definitely like where I'm at right now, looking back at like little high school Kath, like sitting in my room, writing poetry, like obviously then I didn't recognize like, this is the way I connect with God. Yeah. Like a lot of people like through worship music, reading the Bible, like a lot of people, everyone connects with God in totally different ways. Yeah. But I didn't recognize obviously that was how I was connecting with God. But I think looking back now, I'm like, oh, even though I didn't really think I had a personal relationship with God, he was there with me in that time. Yeah. And then I think in college is when it like clicked that I was like, oh, this is like, this is God. I remember a specific time my roommates and I, it was my sophomore year of college. We were driving up to someone's cabin, and we were just in the car, and so much of my writing just takes place on my phone. I like write in my notes, and it just like happens at very random times. But we were driving in the car, and there was a bunch of us, and I remember just being really upset that day. I don't remember what I was upset about, but I just started writing something in my phone, and I almost didn't like know what I wrote. I just kind of closed my phone. And then later on, one of my roommates who, at the time I like really looked up to her faith and really looked up to her relationship with God. Cause at that time I still was navigating, and I mean, I still am, but I still really wasn't sure what it looked like to have a relationship with God. And I remember her opening my phone and like looking at what I had just written. And she said, Kath, God told you this. Wow. And I like remember just breaking down, cause I was like, he can do that?
Yeah,
like
totally.
What? Yeah. So that was like the first time I feel like that I really like felt God's presence with me.
That's awesome. What was your friend's name?
Christina.
Maybe
I don't think she's on social media. I don't know what she does. She moved to California.
We'll deliver a
personal message,
tape cassette, cassette of this podcast.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's amazing. Oh, I asked you before if you wouldn't mind reading one of your poems. Yeah. And I don't know which one you picked, but which is unique because you're the first writer on this podcast. Yeah, and hopefully we have more authors and poets down the road.
Awesome.
But I'd love for you to, it may feel awkward just right now, but I think people listening will really appreciate if you wouldn't mind reading one of your poems.
I would love to.
Do it. Can't wait. This is your art.
I never read them out loud, so this is kind of weird. No, I write them and I post them, but I don't read them out loud.
Have you ever in a public forum read it? So this is it.
Yeah. So this is it. My big debut.
Yeah. There will literally be thousands of people that listen to this. Cool. And listen to your poem.
No pressure. No pressure. Thank you for
no pressure. Yeah.
Prefacing it that way. Okay. It's called Making Noise. When I was young, I didn't know how to snap my fingers. I would hit them against each other like two tone-deaf vocalists trying to duet. I spent far too much time trying to make sense and not nearly enough just making noise. I walked into battlefields with poems instead of fists, wearing metaphors and rhymes as armor. And I let people tell me that gentle didn't survive wars. But here I am, purple heart, shell-shocked, and gentle, still wrapping my metaphors around the ugly stuff. Because I am 24 and I still have not found a language that translates pain, so I speak it in analogies. I've learned to snap my fingers now, but I prefer to do it wrong. I like myself better when I stop trying to make sense and just make noise.
Amazing. It's awesome. Thanks. I've got 47 questions now because of that. But I can see even in you reading that, how people can, in all walks of life, identify with your writing. I think just when anybody talks about pain,
totally,
or the difficulty that we have in life at times, people can identify. Mm-hmm. I think about in the Bible, like there's different poets and writers. And I mean, David would be one who wrote Psalms or many of the Psalms, and some of them are songs and poems and all of that. And now we read those thousands of years later that bring encouragement. And I was reading one the other day, again, David wrote it, and it's like something like, as basic as help me, God. Mm-hmm. Like I'm something to the effect of like, I'm drowning and my enemies are coming in on me. And it's just weird that when I'm experiencing pain and I read that, it's like that's his worst day that he wrote about, that I find encouragement in. Mm-hmm. And it's not even encouraging. It's like, God, I need help, you know?
But it's in knowing that someone else needs help too. Like you're not the only one.
You're not alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's insane. I remember being in high school and having a period of what I would call depression. It would be my most depressed moment. And I remember this feeling of, it had to do with our move from Wisconsin to North Dakota, that I just shut down. And I remember this feeling of like, I hate life, but I'm okay. Like but I'm also like addicted to that feeling of I hate life. You know, like I want this, I want everything to change, but I actually don't want it to change.
Yeah. It's easier to be sad and to like let yourself sit in that than it is to change. And
you almost feel special in that sense, that you are going through so much pain alone, which can make you feel special. It's just a weird thing. Yeah. And it takes a miracle. Depression is a real thing, that it takes a miracle. And I believe it takes God intervening. And for sure there's medicine these days and doctors and all that. Praise God for that. It's amazing. But I felt like, and it was actually through a conversation with my dad that I felt like God helped me climb out of that pit, that I was actually content in staying. Yeah. But I hated it. You know, it's like it's just a tough thing to even process mentally. And so as you write about that, I think it helps so many people process what they're going through and help them out of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's naming like pain for someone that I didn't ever have named for me growing up. Yeah. It's a really cool
For sure.
thing.
And as you read that poem, what was it called again?
Making noise.
Making noise.
I think.
Yeah. For sure. As you read that, I think it's awesome that God's given you this gift, and that's how he speaks not only to you, but through you. Yeah. Not everybody has that gift. And so you gotta, like, obviously just keep, you're going to do it without my encouragement anyways, but
but your encouragement really helps.
You have to keep doing it. And just know that your writing, I feel like the Holy Spirit's in it, you know, and it has the weight beyond your age and experience. Cause how old are you now?
24.
Yeah. So you wrote that at 24.
I actually wrote it at 22, but as I was reading it, I changed it to 24.
Oh, really?
I was like, panicked for a second. I was like, how old am I? Oh, really?
So the actual poem is 22, but now you're 24. So you wrote it 2 years ago. And anyways, just know that I feel it for sure. And there's thousands of people around the world that feel it, and people that listen to this podcast that feel it, that it carries more than the weight of your years, and more than even the weight of your experience, which your experience is vast in regards to, because it's your experience. Yeah. But it carries the weight of the Holy Spirit, which is the coolest thing. Yeah. The counselor can speak through your words to somebody else. It's amazing. Switching gears is you're writing a book. Yeah. And there's actually a story behind the fact that you have written this book, but you have lost this book.
Yes.
So talk about that.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously my main goal, like when you decide you want to be a writer, obviously like a goal is that you want to publish a book.
Yeah.
And I've been working on this book for, I mean, it's a compilation of short writing. So like, I guess you could say poems. So it's like a compilation of writing from over the past like 4 years or so. So I like finally put it all together and I decided like, I'm going to make this book on my own. Because I'm super tech savvy like that. I'm not at all. But I was like, I have too specific of a vision. Like I just want to try to do it on my own.
Yeah.
So I started making it on InDesign. And I had used InDesign like one time in
What's InDesign?
college. It's like a
graphics
software.
program?
Yeah, Adobe. It's
Okay,
like Photoshop.
Cool.
Yeah. But I'd used it like one time in college for journalism. So I knew nothing really about it.
Yeah.
So I just started watching like YouTube tutorials and texting Tissel a lot and just trying to figure out
Shout out
like
to Tissel. He's in the room because he's the producer of this
is, yeah.
podcast. We love you, Tissel.
But yeah, so I like just trying to figure that out. So it took me like a good chunk of time to just even figure out how to use the software. And then when I like had a good handle on it, I started just making the book and I finally was in the finishing stages. So it took me about like 7 months maybe to like fully compile it all. Just decide like design and font and size and all that. So yeah, I was in like the finishing stages of it, had the title, had the cover made and everything.
I just hate that you're doing all of this in past tense.
And then my computer just died one day. I'm sitting at the coffee shop and it's at 3% and I'm like, oh, I'll just plug it in. That's normal response. So I plug it in, it doesn't charge. I'm like, maybe my computer charger is broken, like Floyd chews on stuff. It's probably broken. So then later that day, went and got a new cord, plugged it in. At this point, the computer died, and then it never turned back on. And so I'm like, okay, so there's got to be something like going on with it that I don't understand. That's easily like that you can fix easily.
Easy fix.
Yeah,
Just
and
gotta get a new battery.
Caleb, just my husband, just can do everything. It's frustrating sometimes, but also helpful.
For sure.
So I'm like,
Talented.
for sure he'll be able to fix it. And Caleb couldn't fix it. And as soon as he couldn't fix it, I knew that something was
Devastation.
bad. Yeah. So we brought it to the Apple store and the Apple guy is like, yeah, basically we have to send it in and most likely they'll just have to replace the hard drive and you'll lose everything. And I was like, cool.
What?
So I started like weeping in the Apple store and the guy like did not know what to do with me. He's like, I'm so sorry. And Caleb's like, she just has a lot of feelings. She's a writer. I don't know. And so he was like, okay, we have one alternative. There's this company. They restored information from like the lost space shuttle. I don't know if he made that up just to make me feel better or if it's true, but apparently this company is really good at restoring information and data. So he was like, you can send it to them. It might be kind of pricey. So we sent it in and they said, yeah, it'll cost $900 and we might be able to get your data. And I was like, so my husband works at a church. I'm a poet. We don't exactly have $900.
GoFundMe to restore her story.
So we're going to still try to do that. But as of right now, that's the only option we have. So
did you lose the writing or just the layout of the book?
So a lot of the writing I did on InDesign.
Yeah.
So I still have some of it elsewhere, which that's good. But yeah, most of it is on InDesign.
Wow.
So.
And, okay, well, that's devastating. But either way, it gets restored or you're going to go through the process of putting it together again and writing again. What is the book about? Yeah.
So it's kind of like I said, like a compilation of writing from the past few years. And as I went through and like collected writing and wrote new pieces and stuff, I found kind of like a pattern I felt like within just like sections of it. Yeah. So I ended up splitting it up into chapters. Some of the chapter titles are like healing, growing, becoming, just different things like that. And the writings just kind of fit into each of those categories. And it's sort of like different times of my life over the past few years have sort of like somehow fit into those categories. So it's like a process of that throughout the whole book.
And what's the book called?
This Is My Something.
This Is My Something? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Healing, growing, becoming. What a great title. Oh my goodness. That's awesome.
Actually, I was at, it was a couple years ago, and Tapestry, the magazine, here in Minneapolis.
Which you also write for at times.
Yeah. And some of my best friends work for them. But we were at like a tapestry meeting a couple of years back, and a girl was sharing her story about she'd gone through abuse and all this stuff, and she was sharing it, and everyone in the room was just crying. And when she finished telling her story, she was like, and this sounds really sad, but everyone has their something. This is my something. And I like whipped out my phone and wrote down like future book title. This is my something.
Yes.
So that's how it happened.
Wow. That's awesome. What's an example of, so in those areas, if you can give an example, healing, growing, and becoming, you can start with any of them. What's an example in a non-poem form of you becoming or growing or healing?
Yeah. I think a big example, this particular season of my life that I'm in right now is a huge growing season. Kind of like I talked about earlier a little bit, like with my family, everything was always just kind of shoved under the rug. We just kind of like, if there was pain, like we put it up on the shelf, didn't deal with it. And then I met Caleb, my husband, and marriage has just been like the biggest season of growing for me because suddenly there's this person that is closer to me than I've ever been.
And he's not going to shove it under the rug.
No,
or let you just
he wants to take everything out from under the rug. Yeah, so it's kind of been a season of like, it's like I had all this stuff up on shelves and now it's just all crashing down, and I'm just kind of sitting in this pile of things that I'm sorting through. And it's like a really beautiful healing season, but it's also been like the most painful season, I think, that I've gone through, just because it's forcing me to acknowledge and recognize all of the hurt from my past and from my family, and just like identifying it and finally like for the first time naming it and saying like, yeah, this is like what I'm going through. And
for sure. I think that's really powerful. To be the humans we were created to be, we have to identify whether it's lies that were foundational as children that we began to believe about ourselves, to identify those and then to rename them, name them as lies, but then put into us what God sees about us. And it's just awesome that you're doing that, because all it's going to do is make you more powerful as a human, to do exactly what you were created and called to do. And what a great example too, of like, you had put all this stuff on the shelf and not dealt with it. And getting married has caused you to take it all off the shelf. And which you're doing in real life, by the way. In actual physical life, you move in together. And it's
so many shelves.
There's so many shelves to organize. But now you're putting. It's cool because, in a lot of ways, that's what everybody does as they step into marriage. You know, for you, it feels epic because you've put things on shelves, but that's what everybody does. And what you're setting is kind of a new standard, because you are now one with your husband and your husband and wife, and you're determining who you guys are going to be and how you're going to live your life and how you're going to raise your family and how so I think it's awesome. You're setting now a new foundation for the rest of your life, which you got a long way to go. Which is awesome. How about becoming? So it's just, and maybe you'd say the same thing is the same story, but do you have an example of who you want to become, or who you have become, or who you're becoming? Yeah,
I think like the three are really synonymous. Like becoming, healing, growing, like that's like pretty much the summary of my season I'm in right now. I think becoming, it's like comes right after growing. I'm like becoming who I want to be. And in order to do that, I need to acknowledge the pain and the hurt of my past. And so like right now, like this has been the first season of my life that I've like experienced panic attacks and like an actual tangible act of anxiety, which before in my life, it was like, I'm anxious and like things aren't quite like normal, but I wasn't experiencing it like tangibly or like physically. So this season of my life has been like dealing with that and like in counseling.
Actually having panic attacks, you're saying. So, and you're going through counseling. So what's in it? What are you experiencing with a panic attack? Because there's people listening that feel anxiety. And if they don't deal with some of this stuff, this is how it comes out. Is in that type of thing. So what does that look like for you? Yeah. So I think that the reason that panic attacks are happening in this season is because there's like now specific triggers that I can name from my past of like hurt and like painful things that have happened that I never named before. But now that they're named, they've become like actual triggers. So if like something comes up, that's like a trigger. And
what panic attacks have like looked like for me for the most part is just, it's kind of like you're in like a really loud room and like you just like can't shut anything off. Like even if you're just alone, like it just feels like everything is just too much.
Yeah.
And my hands just get kind of numb and like it just is like, it's a really freaky thing. Like my first one happened, I was like, I'm dying. Like I need to go to the hospital. And I've heard a lot of people have that experience with panic attacks. It's just like a freaky thing.
Like feeling overwhelmed in every way possible.
Uh-huh.
That's crazy.
So that's been an interesting thing to work through too with marriage is like Caleb's the best and he is like so understanding and so willing to learn, but he's never dealt with any of that. So it's like learning for myself what it all means, but also like trying to help him understand and like help him to help me kind of thing. Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons you guys are married is you're going to help him process who he is and who he's becoming, and he gets to be there and support you.
Totally.
And even if he may not understand, there's things about my wife I may not understand, but I'm learning how to best. It's the honor of life as a husband is to learn how we can best serve and love our spouse. You know, and so I think that's And he's the perfect person to do that with you and to learn and grow. Okay, talk about this. Who do you want to become? Like when you think about your future, and not just professionally as an author, I think let's sell millions of books. Let's do it. Which it could totally happen. I'd be crossed. I'd be jacked
Just
about
the
it.
next J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, for sure. I'm in. Let's do this. But who do you want to become as a person? Who is Kath Brose?
Yeah.
10 years from now or 20 years from now?
Yeah. I mean, I think I just want to be a person that's a safe place and like a place where people can just come and feel understood and like set all of their stuff down and not feel like they need to be anything or say the right thing. And just like, that sounds so vague, but I just like want to be a safe place for people.
Yeah.
Like both professionally and just like in my normal life. I think that's just my main goal. Very vague, but
no, it's awesome. And anything about God, like just in your journey of faith, you've learned so much about the fact that he's been with you through your pain, that now he can speak through you, through your writing, but just who you want to become as a woman of God in faith. Is there anything you think about when I say that?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like the same thing. Like, I want to be a person that, like maybe someone who doesn't have any idea who God is, like I want them to meet me and like see something different. And maybe they don't know what that is right away, but I want to like be God, to people, not be God to people, but like show people God through me.
I think we are like, Jesus is not walking the planet anymore, although the Holy Spirit is here and working through people's lives. I think we are called to be God in people's lives. Will never be perfect, but the Bible talks about how he's strong in the midst of our weakness. So it has nothing to do with us actually being God, but representing, doing a good job representing. So I think you do that really well. Thanks. And you got a gentle spirit, and God's obviously brought you through a lot, and there's more challenge ahead for sure, but there's also the best life ahead, which is amazing. And before we wrap up this whole thing, I got a couple questions. One would be, what's your favorite book of all time?
Gosh, it's tough, but I think I've got to say A Million Miles in 1,000 Years by Donald Miller.
Yeah.
Have you ever read it?
I haven't read it, but
you need to.
I've heard
of it.
It's
so good.
Same author, Blue Like Jazz.
Yeah, it was between Blue Like Jazz and A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. Blue Like Jazz is like the first book I read where I was like, where I really like felt God too. That was like my first like God encounter through like another person's writing. But then all of Donald Miller's books are so good, but A Million Miles in 1,000 Years is probably my favorite.
What's it about?
He basically goes on this road trip, and that's the whole book. It's like him on this road trip, but I don't know. It's just
and all the things he encounters.
And all of his encounters with God and like people, and it's just good. On one of our first dates, Caleb and I both said that was our favorite book, and I'd never met anyone who. It's not one of his most popular books, but it's so good.
A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. Okay, second question is, if you had a piece of advice to somebody that's following in your footsteps that maybe right now, as they listen to this, they are experiencing same family dynamics, or they want to be a writer like you, or they just want to be a strong woman of God and a great wife. Like, what piece of advice would you give them?
Yeah.
It's like an epic question.
Yeah. Gosh, no pressure. I mean, I think just like figure out like who you are and like who you want to be, and just like work at that. Because I think that it's like, especially being a writer or like in the creative field, it's like really important to have a good like grasp on who you are, and not just who you are as a person, but like who you are in God, and like what that looks like for you. And then to just like stick with it, because it's so easy these days to like see all of the comparison traps that are set up around us with social media and just in general these days. And to like kind of like switch back and forth on who you are and like what you believe. But I think that if you like have a firm grip on like who you are and what you really want and what you want to be to people, then you're good.
I think it's great. What about specifically to somebody that is dealing with depression, or they had a panic attack last week, or they've got serious stress and anxiety, and they might be 12 years old, or they might be 17 years old, dealing with that, and they know a little bit of your story. What would you say to them? Yeah.
I mean, as cheesy as it sounds, like you're not alone. Like it's so easy to feel like you're the only person on the planet going through that thing. And you might be going through it in a totally different way than another person, and that's fine, but you're both going through it. And I think it's important too, to like vocalize it and to normalize that, like, this is what you're going through, because if you keep it pent up, then it's easy to feel like you're just like a weirdo, or like no one understands. But I think like naming it and talking about it normalizes it, but then also remembering like there's hope. And like you were saying, like it's easy and comfortable sometimes to like get stuck in like pain, and like you kind of almost like want to feel that way because you're like, it's just easier. But like knowing that there's hope and that like you're going to make it through it.
It's amazing. It's awesome. All right. Where can people find you online if they want to check out some of your writing or follow you?
Kath Brose, Instagram. And then Damsel Semi-Distressed is my blog.
So just Google Damsel Semi,
whatever.
Semi-Distressed. It's damsel semi distress.com or .org. No, .com.
.org.
Yeah.
Is anything .org anymore?
I don't know, probably. Probably tons of orgs out there. I don't know. Anyways, that's where they can find you. And so please, anybody listening, go check out Kath, and you will be encouraged. And before we close, Kaylee and I, my wife and I, we love you, and we think the world of you guys. And
Adley.
And knowing your story and all that you've been through and who you are now, we just are so encouraged and inspired by you. And I think our goal in our life in relationship with you and Caleb is we would do anything for you. And if we can provide, I'm just saying this publicly for everybody, but we want to be people in your guys' life that provide a safe place for you to be exactly who you are, pain and all, greatness and all, to be, And I just think we'll be friends for life because we love you, and I love Caleb. And just believing the best for your future too, that whenever this book releases, that God does more through it than you ever thought possible, that it goes places you never thought possible. That your career in writing is so successful, but it's secondary to the impact for the kingdom and for God, because I think your writing is going to save lives, if it hasn't already, which is awesome. And it's going to introduce people to faith, even though that's not necessarily what you specifically write about, although you do write about your relationship with the Lord. I think it's going to save lives. I think people are going to meet Jesus as a result of it. And so I'm just wishing that you sell millions and millions and millions and millions of copies. It would be great. Find Kath Brose on Instagram and online. And thanks so much for being here. We love you.
It's the best. Yes. Love you.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this, we'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. We've got new episodes releasing every single week. We'd also love to hear your questions or comments. You can comment below. You can also find us on Instagram at Exception Podcast. And I want to give a quick shout out to our producer, Tissel. My name's Kirk Graham, and we'll see you back next week.